Alright, so let's finish up this chapter, and I've been talking gloom and doom about climate change. We're all doomed as doomed can be. Well, let's look at that. Right? So right now, one of the major goals that we have scientifically is this idea of the 500 ppm goal. Climate change is going to happen. It's already happening. The question is, can we limit or can we mitigate some of this? In other words, can we stop it from going full on melting? We're all going to die. So if the thought is, if we could keep CO2 below 500, the warming would happen, but it wouldn't go as bad as it could be. Okay, but to do that, we need to cut CO2 emissions by 80% in the next, say, 30 or 40 years. And that's a lot. To give you an example, this year, 2020, right, with the COVID pandemic, where world economy shut down for the better part of 3 to 4 months, right, the reduction in emissions is estimated we're going to be between 2 and 13% below normal. So that is an idea to get, to 80%. That's a huge change. That is change on a cultural level. Not that it can't be done, but it's not going to be easy. And so, how do you do that, right? And these are some of the larger scale things we've talked about. Like cars could be more efficient, or we could cut the number of cars being used by mass transit, right? Cars are one of the single biggest sources of carbon, actually. People driving cars. So that's one thing. Buildings, making buildings more energy efficient. If they use less electricity to cool or less energy to heat. Um, One of the biggest things, lighting. Um, I don't know how many of you remember incandescent light bulbs, the old-fashioned ones that get hot. Today we have fluorescents and we have LCDs and diodes. Um, an old-fashioned light bulb, 100-watt light bulb, could be replaced by a fluorescent light bulb that used 6 watts. So you go from using 100 to 6. You dramatically cut your electricity usage. In the early 90s, I had a house, and the local utility had a special that if you changed all your light bulbs to the brand new fluorescent light bulbs, they cost a lot, but they would last 10 times as longer. My electricity bill dropped by over half the next month just from lights, right? So there's so many things we can do with that. Using more solar energy, that's clean power. Using more wind energy, lots of things. But these all seem, right, like huge international or national agreements, right? Treaties. But there's also local changes, right? So these are all things that are on the large level, right? Really, how can I personally affect the efficiency of cars? I could buy a more efficient car, but I'm one out of how many million, right? Using carbon-free energy. The discussion question this week was, solar panels on your roof, but many of us don't own the house we live in or don't have that ability. Carbon taxes, that's more of a corporate thing, but what about personal choices? We'll get to that. What about if the city you live in vows to make a change, right? So more people live in cities in the world than live in the countryside. So even if the United States as a country, the federal government, doesn't want to work on climate change, what if all the major cities like Chicago push their own initiatives? That could have a huge effect. Chicago, by the way, is one of the leaders in green roof technology. And this is a way to reduce the carbon footprint. This is City Hall, built in 1906. The top is covered with gardens. And why? Why is this a good thing, besides the fact that it looks really kind of pretty? Well, this is a blanket. This keeps the building warmer. It's about this thick of dirt and grass. So in the winter, we need less energy to heat the building. And because it also is an insulator, just like if you're in a really thick walled building or a basement, it's cooler in the summer, less energy to cool the building. So this has a dramatic effect. Remember we talked about the urban heat island effect? If every building in the city of Chicago had one of these roofs, that would disappear. It would literally vanish. So if major cities did this, and a lot of cities have set their goals. Berlin, Germany, has set their goal of 2020 to reduce carbon by half. London wants to reduce its carbon by 60% by 2025. New York is looking at a 40% cut by 2030. And so cities are doing this. Okay? But again, maybe you're thinking, well, the city doesn't do what I want. What about the individual carbon footprint? Right? So what is a carbon footprint? How much carbon are you responsible for every year? Think about that. The energy that you use in your everyday life, the electricity you use to turn on your television, to watch my lecture, to charge your phone, to uh, heat your water for hot water showers or heat your house, right? Or to create the things that we use and the food that we eat. They all need energy, and most of our energy comes from fossil fuels. So, in the course of a year, how much carbon are you personally responsible for? You can actually click this link, and I've also included it as well in the materials, your carbon footprint, and it takes you to a site by the Nature Conservancy that asks you some questions about the way you live. Like how big is your apartment? How often do you drive? And it gives you an idea of your carbon footprint. So what are some ways you can make it better? Recycling. Not only in your home, but when you're out. Right? All of our classrooms at school, how many of them actually have a recycling bin? Using recyclable drinking cups when you go to the coffee store. Driving. Now, I always ask this question, how many of you, drove to Harold, Washington, and no one raises their hand? Oh, we're so green. Hey, that's great. And I said, if you had free parking, how many you would drive? Everyone's hand goes up. So, you know, making it easy to get to with public transit, right? Diet. Here's an option. It takes more energy to raise meat than plants. If you're going to eat a diet that has just vegetables in it, right, then you got to use energy to water the crops, to harvest them, and to package them. But if you're going to eat meat, you have to not only grow the meat and all that, but you also got to grow the plants to feed the meat. It's twice, 3 times as much energy, right? And one thing we find is that in people lead an increasingly wealthy lifestyle, they eat more meat. So huge. If everyone in the world ate meat free 1 day a week, completely meat free, it would be a huge drop in carbon emissions. One of the largest greenhouse gases outside of carbon is methane. And the single largest source of methane that we can track is cow farts. I'm not making this up because we have so many cows for hamburgers and they fart so much that cow farts are one of the major causes of greenhouse gas emissions. Political engagement. Obviously, in a year like this when we're voting, there are many things you can be engaged upon. But supporting candidates at a national or a local level that, support green initiatives, that's another way you can do this. So I highly encourage you to look at this. A lot of times people hear climate change and these doom and gloom forecasts, and the immediate reaction is, well, what can we do? And I admit there are times when I'm like, I'm just, we're effed. I get it. But it's not as simple as that. And if nothing is done, yeah, we're right, nothing is going to change. So these are things that may sound hard, but once you start looking at your lifestyle, there's a lot of things we can each individually do. And here's the thing, if only a few people do it, then it's not going to matter. But if we can get people to do a little bit here and a little bit there, and everyone starts doing a little bit, that little bit adds up. And so, again, take a look at this. It's not required, but I strongly suggest it. So that's my spiel. Thank you for listening, and good luck on your quizzes.